I didn't set out to ruin anyone's luxury development. I just wanted my trees back, or at least what was left of them. And somehow, that turned into bankrupting a company, installing a fence that looked like it belonged in a prison yard, and, yeah, buying goats out of pure spite. It sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, I know, but stick with me, because every single step made perfect sense at the time. So picture this. I've got about 60 acres out in what used to be quiet countryside, the kind of place where mornings are just wind through the trees and maybe a distant tractor, nothing fancy, just honest land. Half of it's pasture, the rest is mixed forest, big oaks, tall pines, the kind of trees that have been standing longer than most people's mortgages last. And along the eastern edge of my property, there's this natural tree line, thick, dense, almost like a wall. It marks the boundary cleanly, and I'd been maintaining it since the late 90s. I knew every inch of that line, every tree, every dip in the ground, every old fence post buried under leaves. More importantly, legally, every single one of those trees sat on my side of the survey line. Documented, recorded, verified. Not kind of mine, not close enough mine. And for over 2 decades, nobody questioned that. Until they did. The land next to mine sold. Which happens, right? No big deal. But instead of a family moving in, or even a couple of houses, it got picked up by a development company. Not some small-time outfit either. I'm talking polished trucks, branded signs, guys in clean boots pretending they've ever held a shovel. They rolled in with this project, 12 luxury estate homes, 5 acres each, all marketed around one key phrase: unobstructed woodland views. Now here's the thing, the woodland they were advertising? Yeah, that was my land. At first, I figured it was just marketing fluff. You know how these brochures go, stretch the truth a little, make things sound prettier than they are. I wasn't worried. Then one afternoon, the developer himself shows up at my place. Guy steps out of a black SUV like he's walking into a board meeting, not someone else's driveway. Tailored shirt, polished shoes, the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Let's call him Victor Langford. He shakes my hand, starts talking about progress, about increasing property values, about how this whole area is about to become something special. And I let him talk. Then I told him, real simple, that's fine, as long as you stay on your land. He smiles wider, nods like we're in total agreement, says something along the lines of course, we respect all boundaries. And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because about 2 months later, I'm walking my property line like I always do, just checking things out, and I start noticing something off. There's orange spray paint on the trees. At first I think maybe it's some kind of forestry marking, maybe a mistake, but then I look closer, and it's not random. It's deliberate. Big X marks, dozens of them, spread along the tree line. And then I see the stakes. Survey stakes. Only, they're not where they're supposed to be. They've been moved. About 15 feet into my property. Now I've been around land disputes long enough to know that's not an accident. You don't just misplace a boundary by 15 feet across an entire stretch unless you're trying to redraw reality. So I call Victor. And here's where it gets interesting, because he doesn't get defensive. He doesn't argue. He stays calm, almost friendly. Says, oh, we're just finalizing the lot lines, making sure everything aligns with the development plan. Then he adds, casually, those trees really open up the view potential. And right there, that's when it clicked. I told him straight, those are my trees. And he pauses for just a second, just enough for you to notice, then laughs it off. Maybe you're misremembering, he says. It's been a long time since your last survey, right? Now, I don't like being told I don't remember my own land. But I kept it calm. Told him I had documentation, surveys, records, everything. He just brushed it aside, like it didn't matter. And that's the part that stuck with me. Not the argument, not the boundary shift, the attitude. That quiet assumption that he could just redefine things, and I'd either go along with it or not notice. I should have pushed harder right then, but I didn't. And a week later, I hear chainsaws. You know that sound. It cuts through everything. Doesn't matter how far away you are. You hear it, and something in your gut just tightens. I drove over there fast, too fast, probably, and by the time I got to the tree line, they'd already cut them down. Not 1 or 2, 18 trees. Gone. Stumps where they used to stand, fresh cuts, sawdust still in the air, the smell of it. sharp, raw, like something had been ripped out of the ground that didn't want to leave. I lost it. Started yelling at the crew to shut everything down. And to their credit, they stopped, but not because of me. The foreman walks over, calm as anything, holding a clipboard, and says, "We've got a work order from the developer." Like that settles it. Like paperwork somehow overrides reality. So I call the sheriff. And this is where things finally start getting real. Deputy shows up, walks the line with both surveys, mine and theirs. Takes his time, measures, checks markers, cross-references county records. And then he says it, plain and simple. These trees are on his property. Points at me, tells them to stop immediately. And for a second, I think that's it. Problem solved. But then Victor shows up. Same calm expression, same polished look, like nothing serious just happened. He walks over, takes in the scene, the stumps, the halted crew, the deputy, and just smiles. "We'll work something out," he says. Like he's negotiating over a scratched car, not destroyed property. And that's when I knew this wasn't going to be simple. Because I told him exactly what I wanted, full compensation. And his smile disappeared. Not gradually, just gone. Replaced with something colder. That's the moment the whole thing shifted, from a disagreement to a fight. So I did what you're supposed to do. I filed a lawsuit. Trespass. Timber theft. And in my state, that kind of thing comes with triple damages. Which means those 18 trees. Actually, by the time we counted everything, it was more. Weren't just trees anymore. They were a very expensive mistake. And Victor? He called it frivolous. Said I was overreacting. Said it was just trees. Yeah, just trees. That he decided didn't belong to me. And that's when I realized. He wasn't trying to fix the problem. He was betting I wouldn't fight back hard enough to matter. All right, let's pause the story for a second, because this is where a lot of people get it wrong. They think this kind of situation is just a neighbor dispute, maybe a misunderstanding, maybe two stubborn guys arguing over a line in the dirt. It's not. According to standard procedure, property boundaries aren't a suggestion. They're legally binding, recorded with the county, and backed by surveys that carry real weight in court. You don't get to adjust them because it improves your view or your profit margin. That's not development. That's trespass. From a legal perspective, what Victor did wasn't just careless. It crossed into timber theft, which in many states triggers enhanced penalties, sometimes even triple damages, specifically to discourage developers from doing exactly this and just paying it off later. The law assumes intent when you move markers and cut anyway. But here's the deeper layer. This is a psychological trap. Developers like Victor operate on momentum and pressure. Big projects, tight timelines, lots of money on the line. They assume individuals will fold, accept a quick settlement, or second-guess themselves. Especially when the other side sounds confident enough. And that's the key mistake. Because once you don't back down, the entire equation changes. So while all of this legal stuff is getting started, filings, paperwork, lawyers going back and forth, Victor doesn't slow down. Not even a little. If anything, he speeds up. Because that's the play, right? Build fast enough, sell fast enough, and by the time the legal dust settles, the damage is already baked into the project. Homes sold, money collected, problem buried under contracts. And for a while, it almost works. They bring in graders, carve out roads, lay down gravel like they're drawing lines across the land. Utility crews show up, trenches everywhere, pipes, cables. The whole thing starts looking like a real development instead of just a plan on paper. And the marketing machine? Oh, that kicks into full gear. Signs go up, big, glossy renderings of these forest ridge estates, sunlight filtering through tall trees, clean sight lines, privacy, nature, tranquility, all the buzzwords. There's just one problem. The forest in those pictures doesn't exist anymore. At least not where it's supposed to. Because where there should have been a thick wall of oaks and pines, there are stumps. Uneven ground. Gaps. It doesn't look like a luxury retreat. It looks like something got erased. And people notice. At first, it's subtle. A couple of buyers asking questions during tours. Hey, what happened to the trees along the eastern lots? And you can almost hear the sales team scrambling. Vague answers, selective clearing, future landscaping plans, enhancing the view corridor. Yeah, sure. Then the questions get sharper. Is that your fence line? Why does it look like the neighbor's land starts right there? Is there a dispute? And that word, dispute, that's poison in real estate. Because once buyers smell uncertainty, they hesitate. And hesitation kills deals. Now, while all that's happening on their side, I'm not sitting still either. I hire an independent surveyor. Not someone connected to the county, not someone they can argue bias against. Completely separate, clean slate. Guy comes out, spends days measuring, verifying, cross-checking historical records, does it the right way. And when he's done, there's no ambiguity left. Their entire survey, off. Not by inches, not by a rounding error. 15 feet. The whole stretch. Consistently. Which means this wasn't a one-time mistake. It was systematic. And suddenly, my case isn't just they cut some trees. It's they shifted a boundary and acted on it. That's intent. That's where things get expensive. Now here's where I made a decision. And this is the part people either love or think I went too far. Because technically, legally, that 15-foot strip they cleared, still mine. Always was. Even without the trees, even stripped down to dirt, it's my land. And I realized something. If they wanted that space so badly, I could make sure they never enjoyed it. So I put up a fence. Not a cute little wooden fence either. I'm talking 8-foot chain link. Industrial. Cold. The kind of fence you don't ignore. And I ran it exactly along the real boundary line, which meant it cut straight through parts of their development. Not around it. Through it. Across what were supposed to be clean, open, premium lots with unobstructed views. Now they had a metal wall slicing across the landscape like a scar nobody could explain away. You couldn't hide it with landscaping. You couldn't spin it in a brochure. It was just there. And when Victor saw it, oh, he called me. Not calm this time. Not polished. He was furious. What the hell do you think you're doing? That's how the conversation started. No greeting, no handshake energy, just straight anger. I told him, same tone I'd used from the beginning, calm, steady. I'm fencing my property. You can't put a fence through my development, he snaps back. And I almost laughed, because that sentence alone tells you everything about how he sees the situation. My development. My land. My problem. Except it wasn't his land. So I told him, you cut down my trees. Now you get to look at my fence. And there's this pause, like he's trying to process the fact that I'm not negotiating. Then he switches tactics. Threats. Says he'll have it removed. Says it violates planning expectations, community standards, all that language developers love to throw around when they're losing control. I told him, very clearly, if you touch that fence, it's property destruction. And I've got cameras on every post. Which I did. Because at this point, trust wasn't part of the equation anymore. So the fence stays. And that alone starts hurting him. Buyers come out, see this massive barrier cutting through what's supposed to be open, luxury land, and suddenly that premium lot doesn't feel so premium anymore. But I wasn't done. Because here's the thing, a fence is visual. Annoying, sure. But people can still try to ignore it. So I added something they couldn't ignore. I bought goats. Yeah, 6 of them. And before you ask, no, this wasn't part of some grand master plan from the beginning. But once the idea hit, it made too much sense. Because that strip of land? Still mine. And goats, they're perfect for land like that. They graze, they climb, they make noise, constant noise. So I let them loose along that fence strip. And it didn't take long before they made themselves at home. Climbing up on the fence, staring out like they owned the place, bleeding all day long. Not aggressive, not dangerous, just impossible to ignore. Now imagine you're a potential buyer. You drive out to this exclusive estate community, expecting peace, quiet, luxury. And instead, you're being watched by goats from behind a chain link fence while they scream at you. Yeah, not exactly the vibe they were going for. And the sales team? They had no answer for that. You can't spin goats into a luxury feature. You can't rebrand that as rustic charm when it's clearly not part of the plan. It became a joke. Word spread. People talk. Online, in town, wherever. Hey, have you seen that development with the fence and the goats? And just like that, the narrative flips. It's not Forest Ridge Estates anymore. It's the place with the lawsuit. Sales slow down. Then they stall. Then nothing. Zero. No one wants to buy into a legal mess with a visible reminder running straight through it. And that's when Victor tries one last move. He takes me back to court, files to have the fence removed, the goats relocated, claims it's interfering with his business, that it's unreasonable, disruptive. And I'll give him this. It was his best shot. Because if the court sided with him, That would have undone everything. So we go in. Judge reviews the surveys again. The original records. The independent verification. The photos of the damage. Everything. And then Victor's side makes their argument. Polished, structured, trying to frame this like I'm the one escalating things. That I'm being excessive. That I'm damaging the spirit of the community. And I'm sitting there thinking, what community? The one built on land you didn't own? Then it's my turn. And honestly, I didn't need theatrics. The facts were enough. He moved the boundary. He cut the trees. He kept building. I used my land. That's it. And the judge, he didn't take long. Looked over everything one more time. Then says, you cut down his trees. Now you deal with the consequences. Motion denied. Just like that. And you could feel it in the room, that shift. Because up until that moment, Victor still thought he could control the outcome. That he could push, negotiate, pressure his way into a cleaner solution. But that was it. That was the moment he lost control of the story. And from there, it was just a matter of time. The original lawsuit moves forward. Months pass. More delays, more arguments, more attempts to minimize the damage. But the evidence doesn't change. The numbers don't change. The law doesn't bend just because the project is expensive. And eventually, it goes to a jury. They hear everything. The surveys, the valuation, about $4,500 per tree. The penalty multiplier, the intent, the aftermath. And when they come back with the verdict, it's not subtle. They rule in my favor. Damages, just under $300,000, plus costs. Victor appeals. Of course he does. One last attempt to claw something back. But it fails. Again. And eventually, he writes the check. No more smiles. No more polished speeches about progress. Just a very expensive lesson. And the development? It never recovered. Too much bad press. Too many questions. Too visible of a mistake. Investors pulled out. Cash flow dried up. And not long after, the company folded. Bankrupt. All of it. Because they wanted a better view. So yeah, that's how it ended. Not with some dramatic handshake. Not with a clean resolution where everyone walks away wiser and a little more respectful. Just paperwork, a check, and a development that slowly faded out of existence like it was never supposed to be there in the first place. And I've had people ask me since then, was it worth it? Not even in a confrontational way, more like genuine curiosity. Because from the outside, it looks extreme, right? Lawsuits, fences, goats, dragging things out for months, maybe years depending on how you count it. But here's the thing. The lesson here is not about revenge. It's about boundaries, real ones, legal ones, and the invisible kind people think they can push if you don't push back. Because what Victor did, that wasn't just about trees. It was about assumption. He assumed I wouldn't notice. He assumed I wouldn't understand the paperwork. He assumed I wouldn't fight something that small compared to a multi-million-dollar project. And honestly, that's a pretty common mindset. From a psychological standpoint, people in positions like his, developers, executives, anyone operating at scale, they get used to momentum solving problems for them. Deadlines, money, pressure. It all creates this environment where slowing down to double-check boundaries feels like a nuisance instead of a necessity. And when that mindset goes unchecked, that's when they start treating rules like obstacles instead of limits. This is a psychological trap, not just for them, but for the person on the receiving end. Because when someone sounds confident enough, when they speak like they're already right, it makes you question yourself. Even when you know you shouldn't, you start thinking, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it's not worth the fight. Maybe I'll just let it go. And that's exactly what they're counting on. Now let's talk about the legal side for a second. Not in a dry, textbook way, just real world. According to standard procedure, land ownership isn't flexible. Surveys, records, county filings. Those exist so situations like this don't turn into endless arguments. They're the baseline reality both sides are supposed to operate from. From a legal perspective, the moment someone knowingly crosses that line, especially after being told, it stops being a misunderstanding. It becomes liability. And when you add actions like cutting trees, altering land, or continuing construction, you're stacking consequences on top of consequences. And here's the part a lot of people don't realize. The law doesn't just compensate damage. In cases like timber theft, it punishes behavior. That's why penalties get multiplied. It's not just about replacing what was lost. It's about making sure it doesn't happen again. Now, could I have handled it differently? Sure. I could have taken a quick payout early on. I could have compromised on the boundary. I could have avoided the whole fence and goats situation altogether. But that would have reinforced the exact behavior that caused the problem in the first place. And that's something a lot of HOA disputes and property conflicts have in common. They're rarely about the surface issue. It's not the fence height, or the tree line, or the parking spot. It's about control. About who gets to define what's acceptable. And once you give that up, it doesn't usually stop there. That's why I didn't just fix the damage. I made it visible. Because sometimes, consequences need to be seen to be understood. And yeah, I know, the goats sound like overkill. But they served a purpose. They turned something abstract, a legal dispute, into something undeniable. Something every potential buyer could see, hear, and question. They forced transparency in a situation where the other side was relying on presentation and distraction. And that's really what this comes down to. Not winning, not getting the last word, but refusing to let someone rewrite reality because it benefits them. So if you take anything from this story, it's this. Know what's yours. Document it. Stand on it when it matters. And don't let confidence, especially someone else's, make you second-guess facts you can prove. Because the moment you do, you're no longer negotiating. You're conceding. Now I'm curious, what would you have done? Would you have taken the early deal and avoided the fight? Or gone all the way like I did? Fence, goats, and all.